Greetings and salutations. Today we'll be covering the Enigma of the Mary Celeste as we unravel the mystery of its vanishing crew. The Mary Celeste was an American merchant brigantine which gained notoriety for being discovered adrift and abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean near Azores Island on December 4, 1872. The Canadian brigantine Delgita encountered her in a disorderly yet seaworthy state, with some of the ship's sails still fully unfurled, along with a lifeboat being missing. One of the strangest things that was noted was that the last log of the ship was made 10 days prior, and even though the ship had departed from New York City, bound for Genoa, Italy on November 7th, it was found still stocked with plenty of provisions, along with the entirety of its cargo of alcohol, which was untouched. Stranger still was that the personal effects of the captain and the crew remained perfectly in place. However, the fate of the crew remains a mystery, as they were never to be located or heard from again. The Mary Celeste, or as it was originally known as, Amazon, was constructed on Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, and was launched under British registration in 1861. It wouldn't be until 1868, when she was transferred into American ownership, that she would adopt the new name. Following an uneventful history, the ship continued to sail. That is, until her infamous 1872 voyage. During the salvage hearings that followed, officials considered the possible explanations for her abandonment, including a mutiny by the crew, piracy by the Delgita crew or others, and even a conspiracy to commit insurance or salvage fraud. However, there was no compelling evidence for any of these theories, and the court would end up awarding salvage fees, which were relatively low. Despite the inconclusive nature of the hearings, speculations about the Mary Celeste's mysterious abandonment persist to this day, leading to numerous outlandish theories. These would include members being affected by the alcohol, which would be rather odd since it was pure alcohol, attacks by giant squids, paranormal interference from ghosts to the divine. However, none of these hypotheses would be substantiated in any way, shape, or form. Following the Gibraltar salvage hearings, the ship would remain in service under new owners. However, in 1885, her captain purposefully would wreck the vessel, or at least that is what is claimed, off the coast of Haiti as a part of an insurance scam. The story of her abandonment has been retold numerous times by the media, along with online personalities, documentaries, plays, movies. This has turned the name of the Mary Celeste into a symbol of the unknown and of the terror that could happen in the ocean. On October 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs took helm of the Mary Celeste, fresh from its extensive refit in New York, for its maiden voyage to Genoa. Briggs went to great lengths to ensure that his wife and infant daughter would be able to join them on board, while his son would remain home under the care of his grandmother. The captain was notably meticulous in selecting his crew. His first mate, Albert G. Richardson, was married to a niece of an individual who had previously sailed under Briggs. His second mate, Andrew Gillian, was a New Yorker of Danish descent, while the steward, Edward Williams Head, was personally recommended by his old crewmate, Winchester. The remaining 4 seamen were all Germans, described in later testimonials as peaceable and first-class sailors. Briggs was so pleased with the ship and his crew that he declared himself eminently satisfied in a letter he sent to his mother just prior to the voyage. And Sarah Briggs noted that the crew was quite capable if they continue as they have begun. On November 5th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor with Briggs, his family, along with the 7 standard crew members. After anchoring off Stephen Island to wait for better weather, they sailed into the Atlantic. Nearby, the Canadian brigantine Delgita waited for a cargo of petroleum bound for Genoa via Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse and First Mate Oliver Deneuve were experienced sailors who potentially could have known Briggs. However, their relationship is unclear. 8 days later, after the Mary Celeste's departure, the Delgita followed the same general route to Gibraltar, eventually running into the ship. At around 1 p.m. on Wednesday, December 4th, 1872, the Canadian brigantine was sailing midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal at the position of 38 degrees 20 north and 17 degrees 15 west, when Captain David Morehouse came on deck and spotted a vessel nearly 6 miles away, which was unsteadily heading towards them. The ship's sails were set in a rather strange and peculiar kind of way, which made its its movements rather erratic. This seemed to arouse Morehouse's suspicion that something was amiss, and as the vessel drew closer, it became clear that it was the Mary Celeste. Upon closer inspection, it became clear to Morehouse and his crew that nobody was on deck, and they had identified the vessel as a Mary Celeste by the name on her stern. This would cause First Mate Oliver Deneuve and Second Mate John Wright to be dispatched to investigate. When they were on, they found the ship not just seemingly deserted, but absolutely vacant of any form of life. Its sails were visibly damaged, and some of them were missing altogether. Much of the rigging was in notable disarray. However, the main hatch was secure, but the fore and lazarette hatches were seen to be open, and their covers were on deck beside their entries. They also spotted that the lifeboat was missing, despite it being originally stowed across the main hatch. Despite their search, neither the first nor second mate could find any trace of any person, crew or passenger, on the ship. The crew would continue to search the ship, where they would notice that the ship's compass housing was missing, and the glass covering of the housing had been broken, shattered. A sounding rod was also found abandoned on deck. Additionally, the hold contained something around 3.5 feet of water, which, while not dangerous to a vessel this size, it was notable. As they continued to search, the ship's daily logs was found in the first mate's cabin, and its final entry was dated 9 days earlier, on November 25th, and the Mary Celeste's position was recorded as being just off the Santa Maria Islands in Azores, nearly 400 nautical miles from where the Del Gratia encountered her. The cabin's interiors were notably wet and untidy, from water that seemed to enter through the doorways along with the skylights. However, the ship was in all other aspects in reasonable order. Personal items were scattered about Briggs' cabin, including a sheathed sword that rested under his bed. However, most of the ship's papers were seemingly missing, along with the captain's personal navigational instruments, while the galley equipment was neatly stowed away, and there was no food prepared or under preparation that could be found. However, there were ample provisions in the stores. There were also no sounds of fire, violence, or anything alike. To them, it appeared that the crew had just left the ship in an orderly manner, using the missing lifeboat, or just vanished. Upon receiving Deneuve's report, Morehouse made the decision to bring the abandoned Mary Celeste 600 nautical miles away from its current position into Gibraltar. As per maritime law, the salvage of a derelict vessel could expect a substantial share of the combined value of the rescued vessel and its cargo, based on the danger level involving the salvaging. Morehouse divided his crew of 8 between the two vessels, sending Deneuve and 2 of his seasoned seamen to sail the ship. For the remainder of the voyage, the weather was generally calm. However, sailing seemed to be somewhat difficult due to both ships now being severely understaffed, making progress slow. It would not be until December 12th where both ships finally arrived to the Gibraltar area, with the Mary Celeste following just slightly behind, due to having encountered a fog. Upon arrival, the Vice Admiralty's court impounded the abandoned ship in preparation for the upcoming salvage hearings. Deneuve, who had boarded the deserted Mary Celeste, wrote to his wife about the challenging experience of bringing this particular ship to port, confessing that he was unsure of his own fortitude during the entirety of the ordeal. However, he also expressed that he did not mind the difficulties he had faced, as he was confident about himself and his crew being able to complete the salvaging of the Mary Celeste. On December 17th, 1872, the salvage court hearings for the Mary Celeste would begin in Gibraltar. These were preceded by James Coke-Sharon, the Chief Justice of Gibraltar. The hearings were conducted by Frederick Sully Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar, who was also the Advocate General and Protector for the Queen in her Office of Admiralty. Flood would be described by a historian of the Mary Celeste as a man with an arrogant, pompous demeanor who was convinced by the testimonies of Deneuve and Wright that a crime had been committed. This belief would be echoed in the New York Shipping and Commercial List on December 21st, which suggested that foul play and alcohol may have been involved. However, the type of alcohol that was carried by the Mary Celeste was not one that you could drink, rather being the pure chemical form. However, despite the potential for criminal activity, the exact circumstances surrounding the Mary Celeste's abandonment remain shrouded in mystery. It would be on December 23rd that a thorough examination examination of the Mary Celeste was conducted by John Austin, a surveyor of shipping. This would be with the help of a diver named Ricardo Bruntano. This would be after Frederick Sully Flood ordered it during the ongoing salvage court hearings. Austin noticed cuts on each side of the ship's bow, which were believed to have been caused by a sharp instrument or implement. It was also discovered that there were potential traces of blood on the captain's sword. This was written in his report. However, Austin emphasized that the ship did not appear to have been battered by heavy weather and cited that there was a vial of sewing machine oil found upright in its place. However, Austin would not consider the possibility that the vial might have been replaced since the crew abandoned the ship, and the court did not raise an issue on it. Upon examining the hull of the Mary Celeste, Ricardo, with the assistance of the surveyor John Austin, determined that the ship had not collided or run aground. The discovery of cuts on the bow of the ship further suggested some amount of human interference rather than a traditional natural disaster. A group of Royal Navy captains later would find even more bloodstains. These were not fully identifiable as bloodstains, however, and they were on the rails, along with deep marks that might have been made with an axe. These discoveries led Flood to suspect that foul play had occurred, and he sent reports to the Board of Trade in London, concluding that the crew had consumed the alcohol within the ship and subsequently murdered Briggs and his family. Then, he believed that the officers of the ship left in a drunken frenzy. Flood also believed that Morehouse and his men were concealing information, including the possibility that the Mary Celeste had been abandoned in a different location and that the log had been tampered or edited. However, he was unable to accept, regardless of the evidence, that the Mary Celeste could have drifted so far without a crew. It wouldn't be until January 15th of 1873 that James Winchester arrived in Gibraltar to inquire when the Mary Celeste might be released in order to deliver its cargo. However, Flood demanded a surety of $15,000, which Winchester would be unable to provide. During this period, Flood began to suspect that Winchester had been involved in the conspiracy, in which Winchester would have deliberately engaged a crew in order to kill Briggs along with his officers. On January 29th, during a series of sharp and rather biting exchanges with Flood, Winchester testified to Briggs' high character and insisted that Briggs would not have abandoned the ship except in extreme circumstances. Flood's theories of mutiny and murder would receive significant setbacks when a scientific analysis of the stains found on the sword and elsewhere on the ship were returned, and they noted that it was not blood. A report commissioned by Horatio Sparg, the American consul in Gibraltar, from Captain Surefoot of the U.S. Navy, dealt yet another blow to Flood's theories when it was revealed that the marks on the bow were not man-made, but rather came from natural actions of the sea on the ship's timbers. Despite his suspicions, Flood was forced to release the Mary Celeste from the court's jurisdiction on February 25th, as there was no concrete evidence to support his theories. 2 weeks later, a locally raised crew led by Captain George Blatchford from Massachusetts would take the ship from Gibraltar to Genoa. The question of the ship's salvage payment would be settled on April 8th, when Chief Justice Concher announced that a reward of £1,700 would be paid. This would only amount to 1/5 of the total value of the ship's cargo. This was much lower than the salvagers had anticipated. Some experts even suggested that the award should have been twice or even thrice that amount, considering the risk involved in bringing such a ship to port with such a small crew. The conclusion of the Mary Celeste investigation was marred by criticism from Chief Justice Concher directed towards Benjamin Morehouse, the captain of the Canadian vessel, who had sent Danube to deliver the cargo of petroleum while he remained at the court's disposal. The Chief Justice made parting remarks which carried the implicit accusation of malfeasance, leading some to believe, including Hicks, that Morehouse and his crew would be forever tainted by suspicion in the court's public opinion. His harsh words left lasting echoes and marks on the case. This tarnished the reputation of all those involved, and added a sense of mystery surrounding the incident. There have been several proposed theories put forth to explain the mystery of the Mary Celeste. One of these suggests that Captain Briggs and Morehouse conspired to share the salvage proceedings, given their potential purported friendship. However, this idea has been dismissed as unlikely, given the attention-drawing nature of this mystery. Moreover, the fact that Briggs left his own son behind contradicts the notion of a planned permanent disappearance. Another theory suggests an attack by pirates, but once more it seems that this is unlikely, due to the lack of any disturbances to the personal possessions or affairs of the captain and the crew. Yet another theory speculates that Briggs killed everyone on board before self-terminating, due to a potential religious fervor. However, this theory has been all but destroyed by later historians, including John Gilbert Lockhart, who had at one point supported the theory and who withdrew said support for the theory after speaking to Briggs' descendants. The next rather popular theory is the lifeboat theory. According to Cobb, it is possible that the transfer of personnel to the yawl, the lifeboat, was a temporary safety measure, as suggested by Danuve's report, due to the state of the rigging and the ropes. He speculated that the ship's main halyard may have been used to attach the yawl to the ship, allowing the crew to return on board once the danger had passed. However, this theory operates on the idea that if the line parted, the yawl would have been set adrift along with its occupants, and the Mary Celeste would have sailed away empty. There are those who find it illogical, though, to attach the yawl to the vessel that the crew believed would explode or sink. There are those, such as Hastings, who questions whether Briggs was an experienced captain. Would he abandon the ship in a panic if he were, stating that the Mary Celeste would have still been a better bet for survival rather than the ship's singular lifeboat if it had exploded or suffered some similar damage. In a similar theory, this one proposed by Putman, a New York insurance appraiser, the emphasis was placed on the fact that only one lifeboat was missing from the vessel, and that the rope was cut rather than untied. Putman suggests that an intense explosion occurred on board due to the natural explosiveness of the gas given off by the alcohol on the vessel, causing the captain and his family to abandon the ship in a panicked terror as they set out to sea in a singular lone lifeboat. There are also theories which involve the environment in general that the ship was exposed to. Many commentators agree that some extraordinary or alarming circumstance must have occurred in order for the crew of the Mary Celeste to abandon the ship that was so seaworthy and leave so many provisions intact. Danuve proposed a theory based on the sounding rod found on the deck, suggesting that Briggs may have abandoned the ship after a false sounding caused by a malfunction of the pumps or another mishap, which would have given the impression that the ship was rapidly taking on water. The ragged and unkempt state of the sails could be explained by a severe waterspout before or after the abandonment. There is also the fact that a low barometric pressure generated by a proposed waterspout could have caused the water to be driven from the bilges and into the pumps, leading the crew to assume that the ship was taking significantly more water than it normally would have, meaning that it could have been in danger of sinking. There are others who have suggested that a displaced iceberg was a cause for the abandonment, this being the fear of running aground or some submarine earthquake causing them to leave. However, there is little to no evidence that suggests that an iceberg drifting so far south existed at the time in this location. It must be noted that other ships would have seen such an iceberg if it had existed, or if an event of such a magnitude that would necessitate the abandonment of the ship had occurred. In contrast, an individual known as Begg gives more consideration to the theory of the Mary Celeste drifting towards a reef off Santa Maria Island. This theory supposes that Briggs feared that the ship would run aground and launch the yawl in hopes of reaching land. There is also the possibility, while unlikely, that an earthquake on the sea could have caused sufficient turbulence to damage parts of the Mary Celeste's cargo, thus releasing noxious fumes, raising the fear of an imminent explosion, which could have potentially led Briggs to order the ship's abandonment. This theory hinges on the hatches being displaced, or that there was an attempted airing which had taken place due to the movement of the hatches. A newspaper article from January 24th, 1886 also drew attention to another case where a vessel carrying alcohol had exploded, providing support for the fear of explosion theory being the reason for the abandonment of the Mary Celeste. Now, Oliver Cobbs, a cousin of Briggs, supported the theory that a seepage of alcohol through some porous barrels may have caused an explosion in the Mary Celeste's hold. The rumblings of the hold and the smell of the escaping fumes would have created an alarming scenario for Briggs, causing him to potentially order an evacuation of the ship. This would potentially explain his haste in leaving the ship before it potentially could have exploded. Briggs may have failed to properly secure the yawl on the tow line, and a sudden breeze could have just blown the ship away and separated the ship from the Mary Celeste, leaving them to succumb to the elements in the vast reaches of the ocean. However, a lack of damage from any explosion and the generally sound state of the cargo hold and the cargo itself upon discovery drastically weakens this case. The New York World of January 24th, 1886, yet another news publication, drew attention to a case of a vessel carrying alcohol which had exploded, and the same journal cited a similar incident where gases produced by the seepage of alcohol through porous barrels could have caused an explosion that could potentially have threatened the Mary Celeste's hold. However, due to the reasonings above, this is an unlikely theory. Investigations into this case continue to the modern era. In 2006, some supposedly compelling experiments were conducted by chemist Andrea Sella of the University College London for Channel 5 television. Sella built a replica of the hold using paper cartons to replace the barrels, then simulated an explosion using butane gas. The results helped reignite the explosion theory. Interestingly enough, the explosion produced a significant blast and a ball of flame, but curious to all the observers, there was no fire damage within the replica's hold. Sella explained that the explosion created a pressure wave, which led to a wave of flame, but behind it was relatively cool air. Consequently, no soot would be left behind, and there would be little to no evidence of burning or scorching to indicate an explosion, which could have potentially occurred on the ship. Now, onto a more unusual and far-fetched theory. Chambers' Journal of September 17, 1904 suggests that the crew of the Mary Celeste may have been taken by giant octopus or squid, one by one. While this theory may be attractive to some, the fact that giant squids can grow up to 15 meters in length and have been known to attack ships is made to seem unlikely to be the cause of the Mary Celeste due to the effects and the damage to the navigation instruments, as noted during the trial. There have been various explanations put forth to explain the mysterious disappearance of the crew of the Mary Celeste, including some that border on the supernatural. For instance, there is an unattributed article in the British Journal of Astrology which presents the theory that the Mary Celeste suffered a mystical experience linking phenomenon like the Pyramid of Giza, the lost continent of Atlantis, and the British Isle movement to the disappearance of the crew. Some have invoked the infamous Bermuda Triangle theory in order to attempt to explain the disappearance of the ship's crew. This is despite the fact that the Mary Celeste was abandoned in a completely different part of the Atlantic, far away from the Bermuda Triangle. While fun and intriguing, these explanations lack concrete evidence to support them. There have been countless individuals who have dedicated collective decades into exploring the enigma surrounding the disappearance of the crew of the Mary Celeste. And despite the theories and speculations surrounding the case, the true cause of the abandonment and what happened to the crew remains elusive. Was it a natural disaster, a technical malfunction, piracy, or something more sinister? Sadly, we may never know for sure. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.